That's cool. All right then. Well, welcome, guys. Oh, thank you. Well, welcome. There's only three of us, so I think we'll try and make this as informal as possible. I'm going to try and remember to focus on you guys as well who are tuning in via the live stream. Try and make it as interactive as possible. Cool. So yeah, like I said, my name is Jide Adetunji. I am the Chief Marketing Officer and the co-founder of GWOP. So for those of you who do not know what GWOP is a youth-led digital media platform dedicated to discovering, nurturing, and showcasing emerging creative talent. So I've been doing this for about 7 years or so, or coming up to 7 years in May. And yeah, like a bit about my story. I'm 27 years old right now. I founded a company when I was about 20 years old. I was at university. I went to the University of Kent in Canterbury. Don't know anyone familiar with Canterbury? Familiar with Canterbury? So yeah, that's where I went. I studied computer science and business administration. And yeah, I guess in my youth, I was always a pretty entrepreneurial kid. I was always that guy in the playground. I know a lot of people say this, but I was that kid in the playground selling the sweets, selling the drinks and all of that stuff, trying to make a bit of money on the side. I was also quite a creative kid as well. I used to love my Legos. I used to love building things. My mum also enrolled me into like a music school when I was younger, so I learned how to play the flute. I don't know how to play the flute anymore, so it was a bit of a useless waste of time, but it was fun. I used to kick ball as well. Saturday, Sundays, most of my Saturdays I would spend um, in the park with my friends kicking ball or playing for like my Sunday league team, which was always good. And of course, I grew up in South London. Pretty much grew up in Peckham all my life. Went to school in Camberwell. And anyone who knows about South London, especially that side of South London, it was very rough upbringing. So I would say a lot of the role models that were presented to me as a young kid weren't necessarily the best role models, which was unfortunate, because when you're growing up, you don't want to lose your innocence so early. You don't want to kind of like feel afraid or feel threatened when you're going to school. But unfortunately, I was. And that's part of one of the reasons why we set up the company in the first place, is because we wanted to provide more positive, tangible role models for young people growing up in environments like the one I grew up in. When you're young, either your parents want you to go and be like a doctor or be a lawyer or be an architect or something like that, very academic. And just not everyone is gonna want to be that. Do you know what I mean? Some people might want to be a photographer. Some people might want to be a graphic designer. Some people might want to be an entrepreneur. But when you don't have those tangible examples of that in and around your environment, it's very hard to aspire to be that kind of thing. So when we started the magazine, that's pretty much, why we started it. So essentially we started off with a magazine, and the idea behind the magazine was to go around interviewing loads of amazing people in and around our area who are doing loads of cool creative things. And just basically trying to put them on a pedestal and showcase to mainly my parents and the people who are interested that you could do creative things, you could make money from being a creative, and that there's loads of opportunities out there for you. So that was in 2015 while I was still at university. And then we started doing events. The events started going well. I was doing like live music showcases, panels and stuff like that. And then eventually we moved on to launch our creative marketing agency in 2018. And yeah, the idea behind that was to try and bring in more people like myself into working on marketing campaigns so that it would become a bit more reflective of how society really is, a bit more reflective of youth culture, because a lot of brands were trying to tap into youth culture, but they were just getting it completely wrong. So we wanted to put a change to that. So we launched in 2018, and since then we've gone on to work with pretty much all of most of the biggest brands in the world, from Apple to Nike to Adidas to Pinterest to TikTok, Instagram. Kurt Geiger is one of our recent clients as well. So yeah, I've pretty much worked with most of them, and I'm making a decent living for myself right now after years of sacrifice. So this presentation is basically going to be talking about partially how I built my personal brand and how I built my brand as a company, and how you can do that for yourself as well, hopefully. So that's me. That's my social media as well. If anyone wants to follow me, can scroll through and see a bit of my journey. I've documented everything from the beginning. So yeah, so today is going to be literally a branding and marketing 101, understanding the business of marketing and how to work with clients. Cool. So first thing I'm going to be speaking about is brand identity. This is your who, what, where, how, and why. And I'm going to get into a bit more detail on that in a second. So this is a quote that I love to kind of like reference all the time. Brand is just perception, and perception will match reality over time. So when I first started my business, I was in love with the concept of perception. And I think the reason why I was in love with it is because, like I said, when you're like a young black youth from South London, the perception of you is already kind of ascribed. It's like from birth, you are this, you are that, you are this, you know, and I wanted to break away from that. And, you know, when I decided I wanted to be an entrepreneur, the first thing I did was I went to, what was it, Burton's, and I bought a suit. I got some business cards. I registered my business. And in my head, that was my way of changing the perception of myself. So I stopped wearing my tracksuits, or I'll wear them on the weekend. But during the weekdays, I was wearing my suits. You know, I think I even got a briefcase. That's how seriously I took it. Because I really wanted to change the perception of myself, not just for the outside world, but also for me. I wanted to take myself more seriously as a business person as well. And yeah, I guess I learned over time that you don't necessarily have to change the way you look to be taken seriously as an entrepreneur. You kind of need to understand who your audience is and try and, I guess, cater to that. But I guess at the time, I didn't know who my audience was going to be. So I just said, wear a suit, become a businessman. You know, but essentially, that's the art of perception. So this is a concept that I always bang on about. Yeah, this is an original concept. So if you're ever going to use this concept in the future, make sure you guys reference me, because it is something that I hold dearly to my heart. And I think it's something that is so important when it comes to figuring out what your personal brand is and will be. And I call it the bread and butter, your bread and butter. And essentially that is two words that the world will associate with you and your brand forever. So I'll give you an example. My bread and butter, or for Guap, our bread and butter, emerging creatives. So whenever anyone in their boardroom or anyone in their friendship groups are having a conversation with Guap, the two words that I want to come to their head immediately are emerging creatives. Or if anyone's having a meeting and they speak about those two words, emerging creatives, I want Guap to come into their minds. And I think that's been a key reason why we get so many jobs and so many, I guess, brand partnerships when it comes to those things. Mainly because we've done so much work over the years to basically be associated with these two words. Another example of a bread and butter from a famous company is delicious and refreshing, Coca-Cola. So a lot of people don't know that Coca-Cola obviously owns so many different water companies, but not only that, they own Fanta as well. And whenever you think about any of those drinks, you always want to think delicious and refreshing. This is probably the most obvious one that you will ever see. Fast food. If I was to say, think of a fast food restaurant, I guarantee you the first thing that will pop into your head is probably going to be McDonald's. If not McDonald's, maybe KFC. And I think that just comes through clever marketing and just repetition over and over again to be associated with those words. So sticking to your bread and butter with everything you do and through years of repetition is how you develop a strong brand association. So moving on to, I guess, a bit further into your brand identity, these are some important questions that you always need to ask yourself. So the first one is who, that being who is your target audience, essentially. The next one is what. So what product or service are you offering? So let's go through these first two initially. So when it comes to Guap, our target audience, again, like I always say, is going to be emerging creatives. So I've got a slide on the next, couple of pages that will kind of go into more detail as to what that is. Your product and service, again, is also incredibly, incredibly important, because I always feel like a lot of creatives, they're super, pumped about speaking about their own brand and who they are, but they actually don't know what services or products that they're actually bringing to the market. And I guess if you don't know what you're bringing to the market, it'll be impossible for you to basically make money off of it. So for us, our product used to be a magazine. We used to sell our magazine, on a yearly subscription. We stopped doing that now. Our product is now free when it comes to that. But then we also have, like I said, we launched our marketing agency. So I guess the services that we offer there is from pre-production to production to post-production. So that will include anything from research and insights to consulting to casting for production and shoots, basically. And then going into production, that's video production, photography, design, etc. And then in post-production, that is editing, And also we do distribution because we have our own platform as well. So I think making it very clear what you're offering to the market is key. So for somebody who's a photographer, it might just be taking pictures for people, and then editing those pictures. Yeah, I think it's always good to start off with like one or two things. So when we first started, I guess, like I said, we was only just trying to sell the magazine. But in building the magazine, we developed a community. And then in developing that community, we realized that we had loads of insights from this community that no one else had, and that brands really wanted to understand what the creatives or the young creatives in London that was kind of coming up at the time was thinking, what they were wearing, where they were going. So we realized that those insights were powerful. So with those insights, I guess we used that as a way to get into the buildings of a lot of these big companies, and we would give talks and panels and stuff. And you've been on this throughout your journey as well. We'll give loads of talks, basically speaking about our audience and speaking about what they like and what they're into. And I guess that was an initial service that we was offering for free. So research and insights. And then off of the back of that, we realized, okay, well, we've got a camera. You know, we know how to film things. Why don't we start getting that production budget as well? So then we set up our kind of agency / production company, and we started creating the content for these brands ourselves. We're like, okay, not only are we going to tell you how you can make your company a bit more aligned with youth culture, but we can also create the content for you that will do that. And then not only that, but because we have the community, we have the platform, we can also offer the distribution. So I guess over time you can build up your services, and you want to just be as useful as you can to the market. Do you know what I mean? I feel like where a lot of brands go wrong, especially nowadays, is they try and stick too firmly within what they're offering to the market is. I think Blockbuster was a great example of that. And we're seeing a similar thing happen now with Netflix. It's like you need to kind of continuously develop what you're offering to the market. Amazon has become one of the biggest companies in the world. You know, not saying they're the greatest, but they're definitely one of the biggest. And they started off as a book company. You know, and the other day I went to South Kensington, and I walked out of a shop with a bag of fruits that said Amazon on it. You know, and they've got their Amazon Fresh store where it's like, it's really innovative. You can actually just go in, you download the app, you walk in, pick anything up off the shelves and walk out of the shop. You don't even have to go and pay for anything because it all comes through your phone. But I think they're a great example of a company that continuously develops what they're offering to the market. And I think that is essentially how you stay fresh. And I think one of their bread and butter would be, I guess, delivering things to people in the most convenient way. And you can see that even with their retail store, is that you don't even have to bring out your credit card or your debit card to purchase a product. You just pick it up and walk out. So their bread and butter would be, I guess, convenient shopping, essentially. So yeah, so moving on to your where, this is essentially your marketing / distribution channels. Well, in my definition anyway. So for Guap, because we speak to young and emerging creatives, you're most likely going to see us on social media, Twitter, Instagram, and a lot now on TikTok. We've actually recently hired a TikTok correspondent. So her sole job is to basically create content just for TikTok. And this is super important because I guess if you have a product and you have a service, you want to kind of showcase that to the world and showcase that to your audience. And I think thinking about how you're going to do that is very important. So you might not be a company like ours where it's more like digital media. For you, you might have products. So you might want to think about opening an online store. You might want to think about having a SoundCloud. You might want to think about having a Bandcamp or a Tumblr, whatever it might be, in order to get your what you're offering to the market out there. And then your how, again, super important. This comes down to things like your brand voice, your brand colors, and what type of assets you use. So for Guap, our brand color is yellow. It's actually one of my favorite colors as well. And it's super important because there's psychology behind color. So yellow is a color that stands for or means creativeness. It means playfulness. It means community, youthfulness. So you want to think about what kind of color can you use, whether that be in your logo, whether that be in your marketing assets, to basically communicate a subliminal message with your audience as well. And in your brand voice as well. If you know that the majority of your consumers are into, I don't know, tech, then you're going to want to make sure that you're speaking the language that they understand. You're using kind of, I guess, words that are relevant to that tech audience. If you're someone like me who has a young, more urban, diverse community, you want to be speaking in a language that they understand. So you don't want to be too formal with your communication, for example. You know, it's okay to kind of speak in a language that your consumer understands. And then as well, what kind of assets are you using? For us, it's definitely a lot of photography, definitely a lot of videography. And of course, we have an online website as well. So we use a lot of words. So that's basically articles, written articles through journalism. And then underlining all of this is probably the most important thing, which is your why, your purpose. So essentially, why are you creating content? Why are you making these products? What is so important about what you're doing that will make somebody stop in their tracks and be like, wow, I love what they're doing. And I think most people connect to I guess, to creatives or businesses through the heart nowadays. You know, there's so many different things that are being offered to the market, but what's going to make you stand out and what's going to make somebody buy into your brand story is probably going to be this part here, your why. So like I said, for us, it's always about showcasing and uplifting emerging creatives. And I think in the in the creative space, there's nothing almost more noble than that, because you have this thing called gatekeepers, or people who are, I guess, already successful, who like to hold on to the power, and they often don't share that with the people who are coming through the door, or it's people who get through the door and they want to shut it behind them, so not leaving space for the people that are coming after. And I guess with what we're doing, we're trying to get through, but leave the door open for the next generation of creatives to come through as well. And I guess that is the purpose or the heartbeat of our business and what we do. And most of the time, why people will kind of resonate with us is because of that, you know, and they give us a lot of leeway because of that as well. Because our content isn't perfect. Nothing we do is perfect. But because they can see what our purpose is, and they can see that very clearly in everything that we do, you know, we're allowed a lot of, I guess, grace from our community. Cool. So, is everyone familiar? You guys familiar with this brand, Trapstar? So Trapstar is a clothing company. For anyone at home as well, if you can't see it, it's basically Trapstar. And yeah, I think they've been running for about 10 plus years or so now. You know, I think they started in West London. It's basically a streetwear company. Most of their stuff is probably like tracksuits, coats. I think they do sunglasses now as well. But yeah, predominantly streetwear. And I guess this is kind of like a little exercise that I wanted to go through. So just kind of analyzing, I guess, the who, what, where, how, and why of this brand Trapstar. So of course, the who, which is their target audience, I would say is going to be urban, inner city youths. And those will probably be people coming from ethnic minorities primarily, will be their core audience. And then of course, you're going to get the suburb kids that come on and jump on board at a later date. And I'll say those people will mainly be between the ages of about 16, maybe even younger nowadays, 16 up until about 30. So what is their product and service? It's mainly streetwear, garms, jackets is like one of their main things, jumpers, hoodies, trousers, essentially. So what are their marketing channels? They work with a lot of musicians. They do a lot of social media campaigns. Of course, they have an online website where they retail all of their stuff. And I think they have a one store that they retail from in West London itself. How do they do it? What are their brand colors? I would say it's primarily black is like their main color. You know, their language and their tone of voice is very urban. It's very street. You know, they use a lot of slang, and obviously it's very on purpose because that's the audience that they're trying to speak to. And their why is I would say their why isn't as obvious as it should be. But I think, you know, a big part of their why is to basically popularize street culture and basically demystify street culture. Because a lot of the times being labeled street is often seen as a negative thing, but not everyone who is coming from the streets or represents the streets is, you know, somebody who is about that life or is negative. So I think they're trying to demystify this idea of, you know, the bad man that's wearing a tracksuit. You know, not everyone that wears a tracksuit is going to come and kill you and sneak in your house at night time. So yeah, cool. So the next thing I want to talk about is building a community. So now that you've got your brand, now that you understand what your purpose is, now that you understand what the service they're offering to the market is, you want to understand and build a community around that. It's a very important thing. I'm going to show you how I did it. But before we do that, here's another quote that I really love. There is no power for change greater than the power of a community and discovering what that community cares about. Cool. So I searched on the internet, and this is the best definition of community that I could actually find. I think it's a really good one. So a community essentially is a social unit with a commonality such as place, norms, religion, values, customs, or identity. Communities may share a sense of place situated in a given geographical area or in a virtual space through communication platforms. So yeah, so community doesn't have to necessarily be something that, you know, is within a specific geographical area. It can be something that's online, whether that be in a forum, whether that be on Twitter, whether that be on Instagram. A community can exist everywhere. But I guess every community will have different points which kind of brings everyone together and allows everybody to relate. So for you, Akil, your community, I guess, will be centered around technology, you know. So kind of going into what community is for us, again, what is our community? What our community is, again, emerging creatives. So similar to you, Akil, when we first started, we were using the technology augmented reality, which is the same technology that is found in all your Snapchat filters, your Instagram filters, and all of that stuff. And we were using it as a bridge to communicate and speak with this younger audience. But essentially, the thing that was bringing everybody together, or the thing that made everybody similar within our community, was the fact that they were all emerging. They were all kind of, I guess, in the early phase of their journey, trying to find themselves, trying to find their feet. Some of them even trying to find what their passion is and what their craft will be, you know. So I guess we created a space where all of these people can kind of come together, watch each other's journey, be inspired by people who might be on the same level as them or a bit further on in their career. And, you know, just to really foster that space, because when we first started, there were loads of creatives doing cool things, but there was nothing really connecting everybody together. And there wasn't really a space where we could all kind of champion each other and be like, whoa, we're all on this journey together. If you win, I win. If you do something that's inspiring, that's going to help the whole community. So we really wanted to create that space, and we used the magazine for up until this day to basically do that. So here are some other examples of communities. So Gaudem, this is like another magazine that's from, I guess they're from, I don't know where they're actually specifically from, but when we was in South, yeah, Live Little South. So when we was in Peckham Levels, they used to be our neighbors. And yeah, their community is literally people of color from marginalized genders. Again, Amalia magazine, another amazing magazine that's out there, doing amazing work, and their community is all about Muslim women. Again, Top Care is like a bit more of like a bigger established company, and their whole thing is about lovers of cars. So anyone who's like a gearhead, as they would call it, you know, is going to be interested in Top Gear probably. And then Gay Times, another amazing magazine, is all about supporting queer and people from the LGBTQI community, basically. So I don't know, Tolu, you spoke about community earlier and culture. So let me show you my definition of community quickly. I was just saying that basically it's about, it doesn't have to be people that are situated within the same geographical space. It can be people who are connected via digital space as well. But usually it will be people who share certain norms, religion, values, customs, or pieces of identity that basically bring people together. So if you was to say you were part of a community, what community would you say you're part of? Building a strong community is the best way to increase the power of your brand voice and gain leverage within a market. And like I said, when we first started, because I had developed this community centered around being an emerging creative, where a lot of my leverage came from was because I understood these brands. I mean, these people on a level that no one else understood. You know, I understood what they were scared of. I understood what made them happy. I understood what made them sad. And I think these are valuable insights that will basically have a brand who is 100,000 times bigger than you look at small little you and be like, you know, there's something interesting about what you're doing. There's something that I need to take from you. And it's funny because when one of the first brands that ever approached us was Nike, and this was probably in 2018, and we probably had about 3,000 Instagram followers at the time. We were hardly getting any views on our videos, but we was making quality content, and we was making content that was centered around being an emerging creative, and it featured a lot of emerging creatives. And I think because our purpose was so strong and because our audience was so clear, they were like, wow, there's not too many people that's speaking to and representing this audience. You know, we need to speak to this brand so that we can understand more about this audience. And I think that's where our power came from, as opposed to, you know, the power of numbers, because I think it's easy to get numbers on the internet nowadays. All you need to do is just do something stupid. You know, if I was to strip naked and run out there now, I guarantee you lot will see me on your timeline later on today. But a lot of us don't want to do that. Do you understand? We want to build businesses that are based around something that's a bit more dignified. I'm not saying that that's not dignified. If you want to do that, that's your business. But, you know, a lot of us want to build our businesses around something that we're more passionate about, something that's a bit closer to home. So I think that takes time and it takes a lot of nurturing of your audience. But once you kind of nurture that audience and you build it, you know, it becomes very valuable, not only to, you know, your audience, to understand them and to represent them, but also, you know, when you're speaking to brands as well in the future. Cool. So just wanted to go into a bit of the GWOP community. So these insights are taken pretty much from our social media, literally from January to the end of March. And our age demographics are primarily people between the ages of 24 to 34. And then our second, you know, is the people between the ages of 18 and 24. So mainly millennials and a bit of Gen Z. And then our impressions are basically, we've had about close to 3 million people engage with our content on Instagram alone in the first quarter of this year. Engagements as well. And our main, I guess, countries are United Kingdom and then United States and then Ghana, which is, you know, quite a surprise. But I love Ghana anyway, so I'm not too mad at that. And then most of the people's interests are music, fashion, arts, photography, film, business, and more. So again, very much so heavily centered in the creative industry. And just to show you guys how specific we get when it comes to our audience is, we have like 2 different customer profiles, we say. So this is our first, which we'll call our main audience. So meet TJ. This is actually a real person, by the way, amazing young guy. And he is between the age of 16 to 21, grew up in an inner city, i.e. London, studied a creative course at university or college, and might work part-time. Is interested in music, fashion, and the arts. Has an eclectic music taste, but prefers maybe hip-hop and R&B over something like drill. Would rather shop at a brand like Cortez than a Nike, although probably loves Nike still. Is likely to be seen on the night out in Shoreditch. Buys tickets to shows of artists that they actually like, usually some sort of up and coming or underground artists. And a lot of the time does freelancing or a self-taught skill. So would anyone say, hey, they fall into that category? Maybe. Yeah, I think that's pretty much you. Yeah, we call this audience our next gen. And then our secondary audience, well, this is the bracket I fit into actually. So this is Pooja. This is also another real person, my friend. You know Pooja. Exactly. So Pooja is between 22 and 30 years old, lives in the inner city, probably graduated from university, works a full-time job, but also might have a creative side hustle or started their own business or might be a full-time freelancer. Is interested in music, fashion, and arts, and is likely to be seen at networking events, panels, and talks. So I think, and we call this basically our dream chasers. And I think both of them are equally as valuable for us, for sure, because I guess the Gen Z creatives are the people who keep us cool. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to dress like, you know, how I dressed when I was coming up. I want to be dressed like how the young G's are dressing, you know, because when I was coming up, everyone was wearing skinny jeans. I don't know why that was popular at the time, you know, but now everyone's wearing baggy jeans. So what? I'm back to wearing baggy jeans, right? Because I want to reflect my audience. And I think it's super important to understand the customs and cultures of your younger demographic, because ultimately they're the ones who are going to be with you probably for the longest, you know. And then I've got even more detail just to show you guys how deep it is to understand your audience. So this is actually for another project I'm working on. So some point in the year, we're looking to hopefully drop some pieces of clothing line. And I made like a customer profile just so that I can understand exactly who we're going to be selling to. So someone who would likely buy into our clothing brand, someone who probably has tattoos or non-conventional piercings, probably likes to go to live music shows like Recess or Soul Action or Boiler Room, is most likely a creative and deeply interested in arts. They express themselves through fashion. They probably would rather wear trainers than shoes. Probably would wear a brand like Cortez, Nike, Von Dutch, Collusion, Jaded London, Converse, Telfar, Tala, or shop at Depop or Gnocchi. They probably like alternative artists such as Brent Fires, Frank Ocean, Nux, and Tyler the Creator. Probably wears baggy trousers over skinnies. They like neutral colors, but they're not afraid of bright colors. Probably has dreads or quirky hairstyles, and will invest in a brand because it's black owned or has a positive brand story, whether that being sustainable or whatever it might be. And again, just a bit more about them, most likely to be between 18 and 30, might be from an ethnic minority, and probably lives in an urban area. But again, like I spent a lot of time on this slide because, again, I want to go out into the street and be like, okay, I know for sure this person will probably buy an item of clothing from me. And I think it's super important for me to understand exactly who the person is that I'm going to be speaking to, so I can understand how to market to them. Cool. So here's some practical tips and practical ways to build a community. And these are definitely things I did on my journey. You know, when I started, I literally started from nothing. Like I said, okay, one day I want to be a businessman, and I went and bought a suit. You know, but I guess buying a suit is just the first step. You know, you actually need to get out there and do something. So once I figured out what my brand identity was, once I figured out what my product and service was, once I figured out how I was going to market that, I needed to get out there and build a network. You know, people always say your network is your net worth. So I always feel like, you know, even though we live in a digital age, I still think the best way to build a network is always going to be in real life. So even at the event I went to yesterday, there were some people there that I had been following on social media. They'd been following me, but when we met each other in real life, or they weren't following me, actually, I was following them. I met them in real life. I spoke to them, you know, showed them a bit about my business, was a bit enthusiastic about what I'm into. And then when I got home, I got a follow, you know, and I think it just goes to show that sometimes meeting somebody in real life, it kind of breaks a certain barrier. So I guess one of the things you have to learn is how to be confident in speaking about your business in public. When I first started, I wasn't necessarily confident. I was one of those kind of people who I would rather be quiet and in the corner and watch and observe than speak. But I learned quickly that, you know, you need to be very confident about speaking about what you do and almost have like a quick elevator pitch, you know. So different ways you can network in real life is you can put on your own events. You know, these can be things such as exhibitions, panels, live music showcases, galleries, whatever it might be. Put on your own events is a great way to kind of, I guess, attract people who are like-minded to come towards you. So if it's around live music, maybe you're into jazz, putting on your own jazz event, booking an artist who might be a local jazz artist, it's most likely going to bring all the people in your area who are into jazz out, and then you get a chance to meet everyone and shake all of their hands. Another way is if you can't put on your own event, go to other people's event. You know, there's loads of jazz shows out there if you're into jazz. You know, book a show, maybe it's Steam Down, or maybe it's, you know, I know there's quite a few in Shoreditch. Just go book a ticket to go there one of these evenings and just try and meet as many people as you can. Go up to them, speak to them about what you do. Maybe take your camera, take some pictures, post it online, tag them. It's a really good way to kind of build up that physical engagement with people in real life. And then when you are networking with people, of course, you want to go and add them on social media. It's a popular phrase nowadays, follow me on IG. It's always good to keep up to date with everyone's journey, because on this journey, you're going to meet thousands and thousands of people, and not everyone is going to become your friend that you're going to WhatsApp on a daily basis. But one thing you can do is you know, keep them in tune with your journey. You know, post frequently on social media, post your journey. People want to see updates on what you're doing. What was the latest project you worked on? What was the latest thing that you thought of and you just felt like you wanted to express it with social media? What was the latest event you went to? You know, just document as much as you can. And then, yeah, another tip is, finding your social media platform is also another good point. I think LinkedIn is a really good audience for business, entrepreneurs, or young professionals. I feel like almost every young professional has a LinkedIn page, and I think there's so many great features on LinkedIn where you can find people's emails, you can find out where someone's working, find out their job role. And I think that's a really important part about navigating in a space and marketing your brand and what you do. And then lastly, emails as well. Definitely want to try and get as many people's emails as you can. It's a really good way to just kind of get in contact with people in a professional way. I feel like it's a bit more professional than an Instagram DM. I think people kind of respect it a bit more when you send them a formal, relatively formal email, just saying, look, I love what you do. Da, 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 da. I think they appreciate that a bit more. So I think, yeah, these are some really good tips on networking. I very much so used all of them. Even with social media, I did a lot of things like what I call cross-pollination of audiences. So when we would interview people for our magazine, I would make sure that I posted the stuff on our page, I'll tag them, and hopefully they will post it on their page and they'll tag us. And then I guess we'll share audiences, and some people from their audience will follow us and vice versa. Another thing I did was I went on loads of people's pages who were kind of, I guess, doing what I wanted to do or in similar spaces to the one I was trying to connect with. And I would go and I'll follow loads of their followers because I'm like, if you're interested in what they're doing, you must be interested in what I'm going to offer to the world. So I'd follow loads of them. Some people will follow back, most of them wouldn't. I would unfollow the people that didn't follow back, and I'll keep the people who did. And I guess now I've just gained 30 new people who are somewhat interested in what I do. And in the beginning phase of my journey, that was a really good way for me to kind of build an audience, you know, when I couldn't necessarily be as visible as I wanted to be. Cool. So I guess the last part is now that you've built your, yeah, sorry. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah. Very. Yeah, that is a really, really good question. And to answer the kind of following thing back, I would literally do that every day. So I would do it on LinkedIn and I'll do it on Instagram. And LinkedIn, it has a limit of how many people you can follow within a certain time frame. So I always hit the limit, then I'll stop for like a couple hours, and then when they would allow me to do it again, I'll go again. And with Instagram, I guess I would probably give about a week most of the time. Um, yeah, it's not long at all, but I guess with Instagram, it's one of those platforms where your notifications, it goes quite quickly. If you upload a picture, you know, literally your notifications are going to be gone. So you can pretty much see somebody that followed you straight away. So I guess if I've given you a week to follow back and you haven't, then you're probably not interested in what I have to offer. And that's okay. You know, I did have a software at the time, but Instagram has cracked down on a lot of those softwares now because, you know, they don't really accept like third-party apps as much as they used to. But yeah, definitely in the beginning, I used an app. I forgot what it's called, Crowdfire or something like that. And it was really good. You can just kind of do it in bulk. Um, yeah, they've cracked down on a lot of that stuff. But again, still, you could still do it manually and do all of that stuff. Like, you know, when you look at my personal Instagram page, I've probably got about 7,000 followers right now, and I'm following like 2,000 plus people. And I think a lot of people care too much about their ratio and how many people are following them versus followers. And it's like, it really doesn't matter, you know, because if all of those people that you're following are truly valuable and you appreciate them and they appreciate you, then I guess it doesn't really matter too much about your ratio. You know, I haven't been stopped from being able to do amazing things and travel the world, you know, being who I am with only 7,000 followers. But I guess it's the quality of who those people are that's super important as well. So um, yeah, so I guess now that you have your community, the next thing you're probably going to want to do is attract other brands who might be bigger than you to work with you and to put some money in your pockets. So I want to talk through about how you can kind of do that. How am I doing for time ago? Oh, perfect, perfect. So yeah, here's a quote, another quote. I love a quote. The success combination in business is to do what you do better and do more of what you do. So I think for what we did better was it came from our insights, is our understanding of the youth, young creative community, and creating content that was tailored to the young emerging creative community. So for Tolu, for you, it might be documenting cultural moments in an authentic way. You know, that might be what you do better than anybody else. Akil, for you, it might be tapping into marginalized communities using tech in the most authentic or natural way, you know? So I think once you find out what you do better than other people, it can really help you to understand how you're going to basically communicate that with brands. So what is the brand partnership? you know, it's actually a buzzword nowadays. I feel like every young creator feels like, oh, once I secure a brand partnership, I'm clear. You know, once I'm working with Nike or Adidas, whatever, that's it. I'm on the moon. But a brand partnership is essentially, well, I think I've got a definition on the next slide, but every successful brand has a strong consumer base, but also a great B2B offering. So I used the example of alcohol. There's so many alcohol brands. There's even loads of black-owned alcohol brands, actually. I drank a spice rum the other day, Las Olas. You know about Las Olas? Brixton. Yeah, you know about that. There's another one. I think Kano's a part of it. Duppy Share. I don't know if that's the one you're speaking about. Yeah. Oh, you had it. It is nice, you know. So like, there's so many different alcohol brands out there, you know. But what makes those alcohol brands different to like a Hennessy? It's because Hennessy has probably one of the biggest deals in the world with like British Airways, for example. When you go on British Airways, you see an option on the menu that says Hennessy. You know, if Las Olas was there, do you know how big of a deal that would be? Just not only for the brand awareness, but also for the, I guess, their unit sales. You know, it would be huge. So although Hennessy is in Tesco's and they sell a lot to consumers, getting into Tesco's in the first place is basically your B2B. And it's what separates a smaller company from a global massive company, essentially. So I basically feel like even if you are a consumer-based company, you should still have a strong B2B offering. So what is a brand partnership? Brand partnership is a marketing strategy between two non-competing brands. This type of collaboration allows a brand to align with other brands who share similar values or customer demographics. So I use Adidas as an example because they're a company that we really recently done a few collaborations with. So they've done a collaboration with Prada recently to create a product. It was like a limited edition range of like, you know, black on black clothing, and it was really cool. They did one with Gucci as well recently. And I guess why they're non-competing is because Adidas is like a sportswear company, and Prada is obviously a high-end luxury company, so they're not necessarily tapping into the same consumers, but they can both benefit from working with each other. So Adidas are elevating the way that they're perceived to their audience and raising the value of their garms, I guess. And Prada are, I guess, getting a bit more of a youthful, more sporty audience, you know, because Prada's not really a brand that you think of as quite youthful and creative, you know. So working with Adidas gives them that, you know, kind of younger edge. So Guap and Adidas, we recently collaborated on a piece of content called The Blacklist. So every Black History Month, we put together a list of 30 under 30 young professionals who are Black, working in a variety of different industries. And we do like a big photo shoot where we celebrate them. You know, we, you know, highlight them and basically just profile them, celebrate them. And we did a dinner last year as well, courtesy of Shivas Regal. So yeah, the beauty of that was that Adidas got a chance to basically say, hey guys, we're supporting Black-owned businesses, we're supporting Black creatives and Black industry professionals. Basically, kind of give themselves a pat on the back when it comes to working with people like myself. And then us, we got to work with one of the biggest sportswear companies in the world. It makes us look cool to our audience and blah, blah, blah. And then, yeah, that's just another example of Adidas working with a company. Cool. So this is what I would call like marketing theory. And I think it's super important to understand when it comes to understanding the market and how all of these brand partnerships work. So things always start with the viewers / the consumers. So of course, these are everyone's a viewer / a consumer, right? So there's going to be some things, products and services that you're in demand of, or things that you want to see or watch and consume. And then usually people who are viewers and consumers will ultimately turn into creators, and they will create what they would like to see. So Jordans, for example, was created by, well, Nike, for example, was created by a guy who wanted to improve the performance of running wear. So he became a creator. And then creators would usually either make their own brand, or they would sell or go and work within a brand, or they will sell their creation to a brand a lot of the time. So I think of Tinker, who is the guy who designed Jordans. He basically worked within Jordans, and he created most of the Jordans. And yeah, you know, look what his impact, the impact he had on that brand. And then once the brand has that creation, of course, they need to now find a way to increase the demand for it, because like I said earlier, so many people have products and services, but people need to know about your product and service. People need to understand where can I get it from and that it exists, and that's where the marketing and advertising comes in. And again, who are you marketing and advertising to? Consumers, because marketing and advertising ultimately influences what consumers are in demand of. So it's basically like a 360 loop, and it's always feeding into each other. So I guess it's important to kind of figure out where you fit into that. Do you just want to be a consumer or viewer? Well, you're always going to be a consumer or viewer within one market, because we can't be a creator within every market. Do you want to be a creator? So do you want to be a freelancer? Do you want to be someone who works for a company that creates things? Or do you want to be a creator that sells your I guess, stuff to a company? Or do you want to now go on to become your own brand? So I know, totally. For example, Queerbrock might have started off as somebody who was freelancing, well, I know how it started because I know a kill, but it might have started as someone who started taking photography at queer events themselves, and they didn't like how they felt when they went to those events, and they wanted to create a space that was more friendly for people of color who were queer. And then he turned that into a brand called Queerbrock, for example. So you can start off as a creator and become a brand, and I guess speak to more people and kind of increase your product/services. But then either way, you're still going to need to tap into some sort of marketer or advertising person. So I guess when it comes to Guap, we sit somewhere in between here, because we have our own brand, but we also have our own marketing and advertising agency. And we speak directly to viewers and consumers. So yeah. Navigation. Well, that's I think that's a really good question, because I think everyone kind of struggles with that, especially when you look at hair. It can be quite daunting. But I would say ultimately, I think if you want to dominate the market, I think you're somewhat going to have your hand in every single one of these parts. So like I said, everyone is a viewer/consumer. Most people are creators one way or another. If you pick up your phone and you take a picture, or you do a story, you're creative. You might be advertising something to somebody that you didn't even know you was advertising. So I guess most of us are creators. And I guess even as a person, you are still a brand, because you're controlling how you're perceived by the world, whether that be in terms of how you dress, how you speak, and what you're interested in. But I would say for you, you are definitely a creator, and you definitely create stuff that is valuable to brands, right? And you often work with creating content for brands. You was doing some stuff for Adidas yesterday, for example. But then I think when you start talking about consulting and all of that stuff, I think you're kind of breaking into this strand here, which I think is if I'm being honest, I think there's a lot of money here. Don't get me wrong, a lot of money here, especially if you can get a really good deal. But I really think there's an unlimited amount of money here, because every company in the world, not every company creates products, but every company in the world needs insights into how to tap into markets. They also need to create content to market it to the wider world. And so much money is spent on advertising and marketing. If you can break into this bag here, you're going to be a rich person. Like M&C Saatchi, for example, one of the hugest agencies in the world. Only Lord knows how much they're making. M&C Saatchi. Yeah. They don't have their own product, literally, but they're huge. Honestly, so huge. And there's other marketing agencies out there. The first one I ever worked with was a company called Exposure. They used to represent Nike, and they would do all of their campaigns. And it's no one's ever heard of this company, but they make so much money just creating campaigns for other companies. Yeah, don't they? Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that's the trick nowadays. And I think that's the benefit of our generation, is that most of our agencies now that we're creating, we do have to kind of have a bit more of like a down to earth kind of marketing strategy. I think when M&C Saatchi started, it was just pure, you know, like energy within the marketing space. They didn't really have a focus on what the consumer felt. It was just, what do the consumer want to buy? You know, but now I think we have to have a bit more of an understanding of what the consumers want to feel. So I went to the Saatchi gallery the other day, and I saw was it the Bob Marley exhibition? And that was just an amazing space. You know, I was walking through there, you know, feeling so many different emotions, but it's like, I'm now going to be associated with that I'm going to associate that some way in another with Saatchi. You know, you see, oh, you went there as well. Did you enjoy it? It was so good, you know, like just walking through the different spaces. They were really tapping into every sense. You know, there were some rooms where you could almost smell it. There were some rooms where you're just looking at all of his plaques and you're just like, wow, this man is great. There was also a room where you just put on the headphones and it's like you're listening to some of his greatest songs, and it's just like, it really does hit you in your heart. So I think that's where kind of the advertising and marketing industry has changed a bit. So this, I know you guys probably won't be able to see this, but I'll just quickly talk you through it. So a lot of people want to understand what is the process of basically working with these brands, and how do you tap into this wealth of money that's out there. And again, like I always say, it's really, really hard at first, but once you're in there, it's super easy. So the first thing you need to do is put yourself in the shop window. So a lot of people ask me, oh, Jide, you know, you worked with Apple, you worked with TikTok, whatever. How do you do that? How do you pitch your idea to these brands? And the truth is, you can't pitch yourself to them. They have to first brief you. And that's just the truth. You know, like a lot of these brands, they work 6 months to 12 months in advance. So a lot of the time, you know, if you come up with an idea, it's going to be completely left field of what they want to do. And a lot of the time, even if you do know somebody within a company, they can't just go to their boss and tell that person, look, this person had this really cool idea, let's do it. Because their boss is going to be like, but what about the other idea that you're meant to be working on that's more important and that I've got signed off by my boss, you know? So everything kind of works within a process, and it's about understanding how the companies work and what their processes are and what their strategies are for the year, for you to understand how you can now fit into that. So that's why I say the first step is putting yourself in their shop window. And that is basically making the kind of content that you want a brand to collaborate with you on. So for us, it was all about interviews and creating content where we were telling storytelling for creatives, basically. So if that's the kind of content you want brands to collaborate with you on, do it. If you want a brand to collaborate with you on an exhibition or gallery, do the exhibition or gallery, you know, and then that's how you'll kind of be able to put yourself out there with the branding that you want. Okay, I do exhibitions when it surrounding feminism or femininity, you know, then you might get Dove to come and sponsor you. You might get whatever company that is interested in those similar things to kind of come on board with your project if they can already see that you're doing it. The next step you want to do is to get out there and speak about your brand / work. Again, this is something that a lot of people struggle with because, you know, it's just not easy to go out there and speak about your brand. But ultimately, you want to do that as much as possible and get comfortable with speaking about your brand and comfortable about speaking about what you do. Because I always like to say, you know, in the early phase of your journey, you have to be your own word of mouth. And it's super important. And then you want to find a network with the right decision makers. A lot of the time, people just think, oh, you know, I could just walk into Adidas store and go speak to the person behind the desk and I'm going to get a campaign. It doesn't always work like that. You need to speak to the direct person that's in charge of working on that thing. So maybe the person at the front desk can help you with finding that person, but ultimately you need to be strategic with who you're actually speaking to as well. So I guess once you've done all of these things, especially once you've done it a few times, you want to then, of course, the next step is to receive a brief from a client. And then that's when you get the opportunity to pitch. So I feel like every single time I've worked on a campaign with a company, they'll come to me and be like, oh, there's this amazing brief to do with emerging creatives that we want you to work on. And then they'll show me a brief. It'll be like maybe an email, or it might be like a 4-page document that says, okay, here's the aims and outcomes. Here's the shoe or whatever it is that we're trying to promote. Here is the demographic. Here's like the rough details about what we want to do. Can you guys come up with a pitch that basically satisfies what we're looking for? So the first thing you need to do is understand exactly what the client is asking for. And, you know, that could vary. Sometimes it might be like the first ever campaign I worked on with Nike, for example. They were trying to sell this new running shoe, which was kind of ideal for running in the city at nighttime or whatever. And one of the underlying, I don't know how that makes sense, but one of the, yeah, it's one of those ones. But one of their strategies or one of their purposes behind that was also to get more young people in London into running, but also running at nighttime, which I thought, okay, that's interesting. So what we did was we created a brief, and we got 4 up and coming like musicians that were coming up at the time. So we got that guy 23 who had that popular song at the time, Plug Extension Cord. We got Nux who's doing his thing now. We got another kind of like dance artist called Yiga. And then, damn, I can't believe I forgot the other person, but we got another young person to basically showcase how running relieves stress within their lives and how it helps them with their mental health. So it was like a short film that basically showcased each of their journeys and what they would go through on a day-to-day basis and how they would use running to kind of alleviate that stress. And then somehow they ended up running at night, basically. So yeah, we had to demonstrate how we understood the brief and how it was relevant to what they wanted. So then you have to prepare an amazing deck and demonstrate what you will create. So a lot of the time you have to use images to kind of showcase, okay, this is almost exactly, not exactly how it will look, but this is a representation of what I will create for you. In that deck, you're probably going to have to put who you're going to put in the campaign as well. So you're casting. So just put examples of people. You're going to have to put what the deliverables might be. So a lot of the time they might tell you what the deliverables they want will be. So it could be a 30-second video or whatever set up for photos. You kind of have to illustrate that through images. And then, of course, they're going to most likely ask you to come in and pitch it to them in their office or sometimes on a Zoom. And then you want to be able to articulate yourself and your offering really, really well. And that comes down to practice, of course. You know, try and practice as much as you can. The more you do, the better you get at it. And then, of course, it comes to like the production side of things. You need to create and execute your offering. So that is basically putting together a team that's going to help you do this, because you can't do nothing alone. And then you want to create and edit the content or whatever it is that you're making for that person or that brand. And then, of course, it comes down to the release and distribution of the content. So that every time you make something, it might not always come out via your platform. It might just be solely for the brand you're making it for. Sometimes they might be hiring you to distribute it as well. And then once it's done, of course, when you're working with the bigger companies, they have this thing called a purchase order, which is basically like a PO. So you need to get that raised. It's like a number that you need for them to basically allow you to send your invoice to them. Then you send your invoice to the client. And then I think a last step that people often forget is to always review the entire process of working with a company and reflect on the work, reflect on what you offered, reflect on, you know, what it was like working with that specific client, and just give feedback if you can. Not every client is open to receiving feedback, and that's cool. But if you can, always tell them what they could have done better, what you know, be transparent and open with what you feel like you could have done better. I think it really does bode well for creating long-term relationships and also just getting better with what you do. I've had some clients from hell, you know, some of my most highest paying clients are the most stressful and hardest to work with. You know, they pay late, like they're just very hard to work with. You know, I think everyone's had some sort of client like that. But it's always good to reflect on that so that you know what your boundaries are and where you can, like, you know, learn in the future what you will stand for and what you won't stand for. I think it's super important. So yeah, I believe that is my last slide. Yeah, of course. Yeah, but yeah, while you're writing it down, if anyone has any questions on anything I've spoken about today or anything about how you can find and work with different brands, feel free to ask. And yeah, I hope you guys who are tuning in on the live stream are still here, paying attention. Again, I put my social media on the first slide. So if you want to ask me any questions on there, I'll definitely get back to you tonight as well.